So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Barnes. Or the Professor Mike Barnes, sorry.
Thank you. Hi. Thanks for asking me. And great to put this on. Well done. I think if we look how far we've come, which many would say is nowhere near far enough, but this would have been possible to put on probably 2 years ago, certainly. So well done. In case you don't know, what am I? I'm a neurologist, or was. I tried to retire from that, and then I got roped into cannabis development, as it were, a few years ago, and I've been working largely with people who are going to be on the panel and others like Hannah to try and get cannabis as a medicine more recognised and more available. So it may sound a bit boring, I hope it isn't, but I thought what I ought to do is to put the current law into context so people know exactly where we are, because there's a lot of misinterpretation about what we can do as doctors and what we can't do as doctors, because the press sometimes gets it right and more often gets it wrong, and so do doctors in hospitals. So the law changed, the misuse of drugs regulations, if that's I don't want to get too boring with it, changed almost exactly a year ago. And it was a great day, really, because we've come a long way in a relatively short period of time, thanks to people like Hannah Deacon with Alfie and others. And the law was changed really because of their campaign and the media push behind it. It wasn't changed on the basis of anything else. And finally, the Home Secretary listened and changed the law, and then immediately dumped it all on the Department of Health, and they're conveniently blaming them for any problems thereafter. So what can we do at the moment about prescribing cannabis as a medicine? I know many, if not most of the audience, don't want it to be medicalised or legislated. I'm well aware of that, but that's how it is at the minute, so I'll tell you what we can and can't do. Well, first of all, it's only doctors, what's called a specialist register, that can prescribe the stuff. That's basically hospital consultants and not GPs. There's a bit of an exception to that actually GPs can prescribe it, that's not widely known, under the direction of a doctor on the specialist register. So if your consultant doesn't want to prescribe for whatever reason himself or herself directly, he or she can direct the GP to do it. And that's how we help little Alfie, because I direct the GP to prescribe for him. So that's possible, and I hope the law will... That was the big thing I disagreed about, was just restricting it to specialist doctors. Specialist doctors know nothing at all much about cannabis. GPs know nothing much about cannabis, generally speaking, so why restrict it to half the medics? Why not open it up to all the medics? And then we've got 180,000 doctors who we can try and train, at least some of them, rather than 90,000. So it's unnecessarily restricted the pool of prescribing, if you like. What can they prescribe? Well, actually, they can prescribe, there's an irony here, they can prescribe any cannabis product that's grown to what's called GMP standard. That's good manufacturing practice, and that's not unreasonable in the sense that at least you get quality and consistency from those sort of standard products. The problem with that is it restricts what's available in the country, mainly to the big Canadian producers, and the quality of which and the breadth of which is lacking. You can get much more diversity from opening up that market, like people here today. So it has to be to that standard, and there's about 7 or 8 producers producing to that standard at the moment, only 3 of which are in the country. So it has to be to that standard. We can prescribe a THC product. Ironically, we can't prescribe, strangely, a CBD hemp-based product, which is just balmy, because in any medical, term, CBDs are remarkably safe, virtually, but not quite, but virtually free of side effects, whereas a THC product sometimes, for vulnerable people, isn't. But we can prescribe that, not CBD. The reason that is we have to prescribe a product that's marketed as a medicine, and you can't market hemp-based CBD as a medicine, because by definition it's a food supplement. So the whole thing is completely balmy. Hopefully it will change at some point. So we can provide a THC cannabis medicine that is grown to GMP standard. Okay, that's one. We can, what's widely known, you can prescribe it for any condition, and it is not widely known in the press. Some people say it's only for pain or only for epilepsy. It's for anything, absolutely anything. If your doctor thinks that it's worthwhile for you, and you've tried, not the regulations, but the suggestion is you've got to have tried the standard medicines first, if you like. Some would interpret that as the cannabis is a medicine of last resort. I don't agree with that. And some doctors interpret that you've got to try absolutely everything that's a licensed medicine. But most sensible people will interpret that as any reasonable medicine you've tried. You don't have to have tried every anticonvulsant in the book, but you've got to have tried most, and then you can try cannabis. Some would say that's the wrong way round, and for some conditions cannabis, not necessarily first choice, but maybe a second or third choice, but it's not this 26th choice. So you have to have tried other traditional medicines or licensed medicines first. Then you've got to take into account the guidelines, which I'll come to in a moment. You've got to take into account the evidence, which I'll come to in a moment. And then you've got to think of the best interests of the person in front of you. And if you pass all those, then the doctor can write a prescription. The guidelines are a problem, because a lot of doctors hide behind those guidelines. There's guidelines produced by people called the Royal College of Physicians, and they were pretty negative. They basically said there wasn't enough evidence to prescribe for pain, which I found an extraordinary comment, because worldwide, I think all bar one of the 50 countries that now allow cannabis for medical use allow for pain. There's a huge amount of evidence that cannabis, with THC often, is helpful for pain. I'm sure no one in the room would disagree with that. But the Royal College of Physicians, in their wisdom, said that wasn't the case. We've now got NICE. I'm sure you've heard of NICE, National Institute for Clinical Excellence. I don't know what on earth they were thinking about or what they were on at the time. But they also said the same thing. They said there was not enough evidence to prescribe for pain. It wasn't cost effective. I don't agree with that. I think the reason for that is they put on the panel people who didn't really understand about cannabis. And I said that in a public meeting yesterday, so I might as well say it again. And they excluded from the panel anyone who really did know about cannabis. So they came to perhaps a predictable conclusion. The draft guidelines are out now. The proper nice final report is due out, I think, next week, or maybe the week after. But I don't think it will significantly change from the draft. But that doesn't help. The NICE guidelines aren't mandatory, but the doctors can, if you like, hide behind those guidelines and say, well, NICE said you can't use it, so we're not going to use it. Then the final guidelines were, another one was produced by a thing called the British Paediatric Neurology Association, the BPNA. That's mainly around children with epilepsy, and they said you shouldn't prescribe cannabis as a medicine for children with epilepsy because there's not enough evidence, despite the evidence of all the children widely publicised in the UK and around the world. They said quite astonishingly that children had to be considered for brain surgery for their epilepsy before cannabis, and I find that verging on immoral.
Well said.
That is just appalling. They also made a further extraordinary statement that children who had been on medical cannabis products like Bedrocan, for example, and it was working, they had to come off those products and go on a one called Epidiolex, which is made by GW Pharma, which is a pure CBD isolate. There's nothing wrong with it. It does work for some people. Personally, I think full extract products work a lot better than isolate products. But taking a child off a product that is working and substituting it for a product that might not work is also immoral. So I think that's appalling. We formed a thing called the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society, and they produce guidelines that are much more reasonable and more balanced. I would say that because I wrote them. But nevertheless, there's three quite influential bodies that have basically been very negative. So that's one thing that doctors tend to hide behind. Why aren't they not prescribing? Well, a doctor in NHS has got to, even if they make that decision to prescribe themselves, they've got to go up to their hierarchy in their hospital, the medical director, for example, and the medical director's got to sort of approve and rubber stamp the prescription. And you can imagine, I think, that it's unlikely that the medical director will go against those guidelines. They've basically got to cover their arse and the arse of their hospital, and it's therefore unlikely that they'll allow that prescription. And some doctors in the NHS do want to do that, and have tried to, but have been stopped by the hospital hierarchy. One or two people have got past that stage, then of course you've got to get it funded. You go to a body called the Clinical Commissioning Group, and they've got to say, well, we'll fund it, and then that's another barrier that will stop the prescription. So the end result of all that And the law change last November was there's not one single NHS prescription being written in 12 months. Not one. There's 2 children on NHS prescriptions that were, including Alfie, that was done pre-law change. There's none since, for those reasons. A few other reasons is it's an unlicensed product, and that means the doctor's got to take more personal responsibility than is traditional. So you can sort of see that reluctance. I don't agree with it, but you can sort of see it. And the big reason is that doctors are ignorant about cannabis. And again, that's not really criticism, because they've never been taught about it. They've never been taught about the endocannabinoid system. They've never been taught about cannabis, the plant, and what to prescribe and how to prescribe it and what dose. And I wouldn't want my doctor prescribing something that he or she didn't know much about. But you can overcome that by teaching and training. And there are now some teaching and training courses around. But most doctors don't know about it. And I'm okay if we all, after all we need probably is something like 100 doctors sufficiently familiar with cannabis to start prescribing it, and share the care with the consultants who don't want to. And that's a perfectly standard medical model. You go to, say, a clinic on something, say, orthopedic surgery, and a paediatrician will work hand in hand with an orthopedic surgeon to help that child. And it's a very standard model that 2 consultants or 3 consultants share that care. So I'm perfectly okay with doctors who don't know about cannabis medicine sharing the cannabis prescription with a doctor who does. And I do that with 2, 1 adult and 1 child. So the end result of all that is A, we need more education, B, we need better guidelines, C, we need less bureaucracy that stops the doctors prescribing, and we need to have some different system so we don't push it down the pharmaceutical route. Most countries have developed their own things like an Office of Medicinal Cannabis, where they assess the evidence more openly, if you like. They assess the way the products are brought into the country, how they're assessed. Of course, the cannabis is a plant, and it's different from a standard pharmaceutical medicine, and it needs therefore a different approach and a different way of dealing with things. And setting up something like an Office of Medicinal Cannabis, as they have in Holland, for example, would be in my view, very sensible. So there's a lot of reasons why things haven't worked, some of which are correctable, some of which the government can do something about, some of which the government can't do something about, and that's mainly changing the mind of the senior elements in the medical profession. Okay, what else could we do? The other thing is the supply chain is ridiculous. I know many of you will be for grow your own, and actually for those who are able to do it and willing to do it, and are physically capable of doing it, have the time to do it, I haven't a problem with that at all. It gives a broader choice. But at the moment, a lot of people obviously can't do that, don't want to do that, haven't got the time to do that, and they want to rely on prescription-based cannabis. If I write you a prescription today, then you will give it to your chemist. Your chemist will have to find an importer. The importer will have to find the product and have to get a permission to get that product into the country and get an import license. And then the people where it's coming from, because it's all imported, will need an export license. You put all that together, and an average product will take something like 6 to 8 weeks to get in the country. Okay, maybe that's not brilliant. That's not good, but it's not brilliant. But then you get 1 month's supply for 1 person. And then therefore you've got to write the second prescription before you even got the first prescription, which is just crazy. You can't get more than a month's supply except in exceptional circumstances. So that's a ridiculously restrictive supply chain. And if you think about the costs of importing it, 1 month's supply for 1 patient, then the costs go up astronomically. And some of the children we'll hear on the panel later are at the moment privately, because it's really the only way you can get it at the minute, costing about £2,000 a month. More, some, less, others. And there's very few people who can afford £2,000 a month when they shouldn't be paying anything. Average for an adult, with an average dose for pain, will be something like £700-800 a month, privately. I'm okay with private system in the sense that if you can't get it anywhere else and you want to do it that way, then that's the only way to get it. Now, that's been controversial, but at the moment, private medicine, sadly, is the only way to get a cannabis prescription. There's been 32 private prescriptions written since the 1st of November last year. That's it. If we think there's about 1 million people a day using cannabis for medical purposes in this country and another 2 million for recreational, but just ignore that for a minute, 1 million people using it for medical purposes, we've got another 999,968 to help. Only 32 have been helped so far at astronomical cost. So the government, in one sense, needed last November to be congratulated on achieving the change of law. In the other sense, the bigger sense, they have achieved absolutely nothing whatsoever because nothing has changed. And we do need to really work on A, the medical profession to get aboard, and that's not easy, and B, a little bit the government can still help by changing and freeing up the regulations and allowing a better supply into the country. At the moment, so you know, at this point in time, I think there are 4 companies whose products can get in the country. The names might mean anything to you, I don't know. A company called Tilray, a company called Canopy Growth, a company called Little Green Pharma from Australia, and Bedrocan, which is the main one in Holland. They produce perfectly good products, but that range of products is very limited. And as you know, in this audience, better than anybody, you need a big range of potential dynamics, different cannabinoids, different terpenes, to help your particular condition. It's all very personalised, and restricting that supply to what is about a dozen, if that, a dozen products, even if doctors are willing to prescribe, it means what you can get is actually quite limited. So that's where we are. I was told to prattle on for about 15 minutes. I don't know if I've done that. But that's the background, the legal and factual background to where we are at the moment. So we've got a long way to go. I thought last November I might actually finally be able to retire, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So I'm not going to retire quite yet until we've got cannabis as a medicine legally available to all who need it. And we are a long way off that. But I hope to do that before I drop dead. Okay, thank you. Now there's the panel. Where's Simpa gone? He disappeared. Well, I'll have to just carry on and ask them. Anyone want to ask any questions of that before we get the panel, which will have the same sort of questions, I guess. But as simply, I'll just take over the whole event, shall I?
I have a question.
Have a question. Fire away.
Of the 30 prescriptions, what is the sort of cannabinoid profile that people are going for? Do they have a choice? Because what I've read is figures in that magazine somewhere, they 20% plus THC, less than 1% CBD. On the government website, that is defined as skunk. But on the same website, it says that skunk is not medical cannabis. So we have a government who are not supplying medical cannabis. And you use the terms immoral. I would say criminal is absolutely a criminal, that anyone should be denied this naturally for their bodies. So what's the percentage?
What we've got available, well, what I would use for people who've not tried cannabis previously, cannabis naive if you like, is a high CBD product first, because that actually can help a proportion of people. As a full extract product, not a hemp-based CBD, that can be useful for about 20-25% of people with pain.
And you can prescribe that, because I thought you said you couldn't prescribe
No, I can't prescribe hemp CBD.
Pharmaceutical
which is marketed,
CBD.
any hemp product marketed as a food supplement you can't prescribe. But you can prescribe something like a Bedrolite, which if anyone knows, that's a product from Bedrocan, which is very high CBD, 100 milligrams per mil, and a tiny but illegal bit of THC, illegal in the sense of you can't buy it over the counter. So you can, but that's about all. We need a high CBD, low THC product, and the only one we've got widely available is Bedrolite. There's quite a few of the others are balanced products, like 10 milligrams of THC, 10 milligrams of CBD per mil, for example.
How many people taking that?
Most people are on Bedrocan products. That's Bedrolite. Some people use another one from Bedrocan called Bedica, which is a high THC product. And then there's a few of those 32, I couldn't name the numbers, have been on a higher THC product. So that's very, very limiting. And we're very limited with high CBD, low THC products. Very limited, ridiculously limited. And also we haven't got anything like THCA, which you might need for some people. We haven't got products high in CPG. We haven't got products with a range of terpene profiles, which are so important. So there's a whole load of stuff that we just cannot prescribe, even if we could, and we can't. So we have got a long way to go.
Something criminal going on, I feel.
Okay. Phil, there's a question down there, I think. Has it gone?
Oh.
No, I've been prattling on too long. I've driven it out. That is a good technique for a speaker who doesn't really want any questions. It's just to go on for so long that they have to sit down.
I was just going to actually confirm everything you've said, for what it's worth, about the NHS process patients to trying to get a prescription. I actually have a GMC registered specialist for pain. He actually is, I've got a letter in my bag here with me that says, yes, cannabis helps Phil. Phil should have cannabis. He should not be criminalised for his practices because I grow my own, because they won't give it me. But they can't give it to me. So even though I have the specialist confirming, agreeing and recommending, his actual explanation was, the board will stop me. It's an IPF thing, an international finance thing application. And it's exactly as you've described it. You just get blocked by all this bureaucratic nonsense that leaves me risking my freedom basically for bureaucracy.
Yeah, there's 3 layers of bureaucracy, and it's very difficult to get through 1, let alone 3. In fact, you can't. So far, no one has succeeded. The other thing is that there's a slight aside and a slight change. We haven't got a UK-based cannabis industry, and that would bring the cost, for all other benefits of employment and tax and all that sort of stuff, it would be hugely cheaper. And the Home Office is making it, well, not making it difficult. It is very difficult, just say that, to get a THC cultivation licence. But the sooner we can get a UK-based industry, the better, because then the cost will go down.
Especially there's conflicting interests invested in those industries and what would delay the process quite possibly.
Yeah. And we've got the irony, everyone knows that the GW Pharma are the biggest exporters of medicinal cannabis in the world, and not one bit of it ends up in this country, which is a strange anomaly.